My name is Kyle Mark. I'm the CIO for WOWorks. And so he was like, when's the next time you're going to be home? Just going home the next weekend. So got into the city, went down, met him, and about 2 weeks later had a job offer to start working at Apple. Yeah, it was.
But what is your first experience of getting into the retail and restaurant side of things, which was very different from what you were doing at Apple?
I think my first impression and the reason I took it, it was so different. I like to look at things as, the kind of challenge it is. And it was going to be a whole new challenge for me, right? It was something I wasn't super comfortable with. COVID absolutely changed the idea that technology, it wasn't just something you had to have that, if the customer wanted, sure. It was something that you needed and could actually be not just a cost center, but a revenue center, and something that would really help you drive sales. And I think for me, what I've learned over the past 5-10 years is I need to know better the operations side, the marketing side, so that when I go and try and sell in a solution and talk about how the technology is going to make operations life easier. Here's what we need to do. This is why it's good for you operations.
Hi, welcome to Restrocast. Today my guest is Kyle Mark, CIO at WOWorks. Kyle is a strong technology leader in the restaurant space. And, this conversation is interesting because you would want to know his journey from being an Apple genius to technology leader in restaurant space, as well as being nocturnal to joining 5 a.m. club. I think this conversation was really interesting for me because I got to really nerd out on restaurant technology with him, which doesn't happen, a lot on this part. But at the same time, I saw someone who's reading books to really change their life, which also doesn't happen that often. It's quite inspiring to you. Welcome to Restrocast. Kyle, welcome to Restrocast.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start with your Apple genius story. But before that, tell me a little bit about where did you grow up? How were the early years? And then we'll get to how did you become Apple genius before you got into restaurant industry.
Sounds great. Yeah. So I'm originally from the Chicago area, born initially Northwest Indiana, actually a town called Valparaiso, and then moved and grew up in Glen Ellen, Illinois, west suburb of Chicago. Went to high school there. Ended up going to Western Illinois University. After Western, that's actually when I moved to downtown Chicago, started working for Apple there.
Did you study tech?
I did, yeah, computer systems. So, state school, very basic computer systems, but that's what I studied there. So grew up pretty, normal Midwest childhood.
And then how did Apple happen?
Yeah, so it was crazy. At Western, I worked at our computer book or school bookstore, specifically in like the computer section. My boss knew I was, leaving at the end of the year, and he had previously been a genius at an Apple store. And he was like, you want me to make a connection? I've got a friend, Joe. He's a manager at the Apple store in downtown Chicago. He knew I wanted to live in the city, and like, sure, that'd be great. And then later that evening, I was talking to my dad, and he's like, oh, do you remember so-and-so he worked with? And I'm like, yeah, I remember. And he's like, his son works at one of the Apple stores in Chicago. I'm like, oh, that'd be awesome, because I was a huge Apple fan, had been for years. And he's like, I'll see if he, can talk with you or anything. And about 2 days later, I get a call. A number I didn't know was Chicago numbers, but I answered it. And it was this guy named Joe. And he's like, it's really weird. In the span of 3 hours, I got 2 calls from 2 completely different parts of my life about you. And it was the same guy. It was
wow.
My dad's connection and my boss's connection. It was the same person. And so he was like, when's the next time you're going to be home? We'd love to get you in. We'll talk with you, see, if there's anything that works. And I was going home the next weekend. So got into the city, went down, met him, and about 2 weeks later had a job offer to start working at Apple in downtown Chicago at a flagship store.
And what is the process of becoming a genius?
So I started on the sales floor, wearing one of the Apple shirts and selling iPods and Macs to people. And obviously I had a technical background and started troubleshooting at that store specifically. They started with phones and iPods. They had a iPod specific Genius bar. So started working just troubleshooting those. And then about a year in, I actually transferred down to Memphis. I met my wife in Chicago. She transferred to Rhodes University in Memphis, or Rhodes College in Memphis, where she grew up. And I followed. And when I got down there, a Genius position opened, and they knew I was very interested in that. So I actually went in, and really great experience when you become a Genius. At that time, at least, I don't know if it's the same now, but they flew us out to Cupertino for 3 weeks, and we did a really in-depth, hardcore training for 3 weeks, 10 hours a day in a classroom, learning everything you can learn about Apple computers. So it was a really great experience, and yeah.
Interesting. Do you get teased by, somebody in life for being a genius? Because the only reference I have for this, I'm a huge Big Bang Theory fan,
Yes.
and they had a segment on the show
Yeah.
where they really dissed the genius at the Genius Bar.
Yeah. So if it ever comes up, my wife's favorite saying is, it's a title, not a description. And she does not let that go. So
Yeah, I think you took it upon yourself.
yeah. Well, it comes up more often than you'd think. So she really likes to poke it.
So how long were you a genius?
So I worked for Apple right at 5 years. About after 5 years, my wife, she worked for Lifetime Fitness, was a manager, and ended up getting transferred to Chicago, back to Chicago. And at that time, I was actually really lucky. I'd been able to do what they call a career experience at Apple, and I was a new store opening mentor for their technical teams. So I got to actually travel around, open up new Apple stores, train their Genius teams, make sure technology was working in the stores. And at that point, though, Apple, smaller than it is now, but it was still a very large company. And it's hard to kind of make a name for yourself, especially coming out of the retail ranks. And I decided maybe to kind of see what else was out there. And so I had an opportunity at an Apple store in Chicago again to be, actually be a lead genius. The genius felt geniuses, right? And I decided then, let me see what else is available. I put out resumes and filled out applications, and got one call back from a little grocery store in the west suburbs called Standard Market. And they had one grocery store, I think 4 restaurants at the time. And they were looking for a store and restaurant systems analyst. Could be interesting. Let me, talk to them, and went in, met with them. Kind of seemed really interesting. Ended up taking that position. Was there for a while and actually opened up another grocery store, multiple more restaurants. And that was really my first foray into restaurant technology.
What was your first experience of getting into the retail and restaurant side of things, which was very different from what you were doing at Apple? So I'm actually curious on why did you take that assignment, but more than that, what was your first impression?
I think my first impression and the reason I took it was so different, right? Like, I like to look at things as, the kind of challenge it is. And it was going to be a whole new challenge for me, right? It was something I wasn't super comfortable with. I knew I could use some of my experience with Apple and just technology in general. But it was just something completely new, something I could learn. And that really was the reason that I took it. And then my first experience was, wow, this is completely different. Because not only was it retail and restaurant systems, but we had a corporate office, we had, a corporate team. So I was managing Microsoft Dynamics, which was completely foreign to me. Managing PCs, because we had a ton of people on Macs, but a lot of people wanted a PC. I had never managed a Windows computer. I had been a Mac user for 12, 15 years. And so that was foreign to me as well. So it was all about a new challenge.
And were you the, was there a tech leader in that org you were working with?
Yeah. So my boss, a guy named Ken Sang, who's actually now with Science on Call, he gave me my first job, and He was over both marketing and technology. So he really kind of, let me do as much in the technology space as I could, which was amazing. Kind of, he didn't let me just go free and do whatever I wanted. He was guiding there, but really giving me the space that I needed to grow and learn and make decisions and honestly make mistakes. Right? I mean, that's part of learning. So he was great at guiding me and helping me, and yeah.
I asked that question because one thing that's really, I will not really say unique, but I think even more important in the restaurant as well as retail space is that I mean, not almost all of us are customers to restaurants and retail.
Yeah.
And the problem is that everybody believes that they understand how it works because you experience it, right?
Yeah.
So for example, if I'm going to a cloth manufacturing factory, I don't know it, right? So I will go in with a mindset that, okay, I don't know what this is. But for retail and restaurant, everybody on the street believes that they understand this. Yeah. And that's why they get into those businesses. That's why, people keep opening franchisees. And of course, it's a difficult business. I asked you that question because I want to understand what is your process to really understand the business before you can impact their tech decisions.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a little bit of background, and probably should have talked about this earlier, but I growing up when I turned 16, I started working in restaurants. I scooped ice cream for a while. I worked retail. I worked for, Kohl's as a sales assistant or whatever. Worked summers during college. I'd work as a server in restaurants. So I had, a little bit of idea of how things work behind the scenes, nowhere to the extent, servers might not necessarily know exactly how the technology in the background works. They probably don't know that, a kitchen manager might have to take inventory, on a certain schedule. So that for me was learning kind of that, I had no idea what inventory meant for either a grocery store or a restaurant. And they're different, right? Like they're very different.
Yeah.
But like learning that and, that was the biggest challenge really, was getting over those preconceived notions of how it works. The POS, the front of house, the screens, even something like a KDS screen, that was easy because I'd seen those, I'd worked with them, but it was more of the back office systems and learning how really what the managers do and how they utilize those systems. That was the biggest hurdle for me to get over.
Got it. And how long did you work for them?
That was a year and a half, 2 years. I was telling someone earlier, we moved up. My wife got transferred to Chicago, and I think it was 2013, 2014. It was the first real year of the polar vortex and all of the cold weather coming down from Canada. I mean, and I had grown up in Chicago, and I had never been as brutally cold as I was that winter. I mean, there were times where our garage door froze to the ground. We could not open the garage door in the morning because overnight, like, it melted off the cars, run down and frozen, the garage door shut. Wow. Or my boss's car, literally his diesel gas freezing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So my wife, about halfway through the winter, looks at me, she goes, I don't think I can do this anymore. She's from Memphis, where you're lucky if you get a snow day. And it was at that point, she's like, we can't stay in Chicago. I can't do it anymore. We'd love it in the summer, spring, fall, amazing. Winter was just horrible. So my dad and I had actually already been talking about it, but looking at actually becoming a franchisee of some business. And we did our research, and we actually bought a franchise license for Jimmy John's in Naples. And we were like, okay, we can move to Florida. My parents lived in Florida. My dad and my stepmom lived in Sarasota. So we ended up moving down to Sarasota while we looked for a location to open in Naples and open our first Jimmy John's. And, I don't know if you know of Naples, Florida, but it's very old. There's not a lot of new build. It was very difficult to find a location that would work for Jimmy John's. They have, very specific, square footage, ceiling height, frontage, very specific requirements, and it's served them extremely well over the years. So I understand why. It was just very difficult to find a location that worked. And I think there's still only one Jimmy John's in Naples at this point.
Oh, wow.
So we, after a year, we decided maybe this isn't for us. And we ended up selling back our franchise agreement and stayed in Sarasota. I had actually, I was working in a restaurant down there, managing a restaurant, and had met a family friend who owned a company called Datum Technologies. And they did outsource IT for restaurants. Went in, talked with him, and he knew I had restaurant technology background experience. So I started working for them as an account manager, and doing a little bit of technical support on the side. But really, it was my first foray into kind of almost the consulting side of talking with restaurants that didn't have necessarily an internal technology team, and working with their operations and marketing teams, saying, you should probably do this, or let's look at this POS. There was some sales aspect to it for sure, but ended up working there and worked there for several years. They were purchased by a PE group, and ended up leaving there and working for a group, more of a local chain of about 10 or 12 family sports bars called Gecko's Grill and Pub in Sarasota. And that was my first, I was head of technology for a brand, but a small brand in Florida.
How long did you work for Datum?
I started working in 2015, and trying to do the math out. My daughter was born right after I left. So she was about 3.5 years.
3.5. Working for a company that was outsourced IT team for the restaurants, and the fact that today you've panned a career where you are leading tech, for a larger one. Now we'll get to that. When you look back, what was your experience like? What was the most interesting part of your experience at Datum?
I think it was really kind of the spectrum of different businesses I got to work with, right? So First Watch was one of our biggest clients there. So technically table service, but you pay at a register. Then we had we worked with Earl Enterprises. They had Buca de Pepo, which is a traditional table service, to Earl Sandwich, order at counter.
Used to have their own team, right?
They did. We actually I was part of the team that we went in. We actually hired, as part of the agreement, we hired their entire tech team into Datum, and we took it over completely. And then after a few years, I had left Datum at this point. They transitioned back to an internal team. But we had taken over.
I think Tom Seeker built that.
Yes. Yeah. He came in. I had left Datum, and he came in and took that back over.
Got it. Yeah. So,
but that the whole, like, the being able to experience table service, quick service, kind of a hybrid model, being able to see how all of these different, restaurants, it's all restaurant technology, but there is such a spectrum of technology for the restaurants, right? And that was probably the most interesting part. And seeing all company-owned restaurants, franchise. That was my first experience working with franchisees. That was the biggest thing I could take away from working at Datum.
Given a choice, why not continue with a company like Datum?
Even outsourced, you only have so much, or especially outsourced, you only have so much say in what a restaurant group does with their technology. I have very strong opinions on restaurant technology, as I'm sure most restaurant CIOs do. And so it was one of those, I wanted to be able to not mandate, but I really wanted to be able to say, this is what we need to do, and this is what we're going to do. I didn't want to try and sell it into a group that I wasn't necessarily a part of, right? Like, as much as you're working with these teams day in, day out, you're always an outsider when you're, out doing outsourced IT, you're doing consulting. I wanted to be able to, be in that group where I was, part of that real decision-making team. And so that was really kind of my impetus for leaving.
That makes sense. Yeah, I I understand. I think, and that's why I think consulting remains quite a, not really a gratifying job for most.
Yeah.
Throughout consulting, doesn't matter much what
Yeah.
industry you're in.
Yeah.
You can't really own the impact, or you can't really fully own the impact.
Exactly.
That's fair. So then you went to Keko's.
Yeah, I was there for until 2019. I had a friend who was director of technology for a smaller chain in Florida again called Fresh Kitchen. Amazing bowl concept. Build your own bowl, walk down the line, great food. He was actually leaving, and he told their CEO, he was like, "I'm leaving, but I have somebody I think you should talk to." And I went in, talked to them, and I was there 3 weeks later. So it was a very quick transition, but it was great. Worked through the pandemic, which is when I started, I think, November of 2019 with Fresh Kitchen.
Fresh Kitchen. And how big were they? Like, give me
11 units, all over Florida. So 3 areas, Tampa area, Orlando, Miami area. And that was, they didn't have online ordering. They had just started doing some third parties. So it was an interesting time to get into that space. I was on a very rapid rollout of online ordering and integrating third parties and making sure that all worked. Luckily, I had started the process, I guess probably in January 2020. Yeah. So I wasn't totally behind the 8 ball. And then middle of March happened. And that was crazy. Because we hadn't rolled out like Uber Eats or DoorDash. And we kind of see a little bit that something was going to happen. And so we started those conversations with the third parties end of February. So we were kind of ahead in the queue, and we got them rolled out fairly quickly, within a week or two after COVID actually hitting. And yeah, it was a really interesting time to be in that space with fresh technology that the teams hadn't worked with. Our operations team wasn't used to. And that went from being 0% of the business to 100% of the business within 8 weeks. And just insanity.
While COVID was absolutely crazy time, and I think, nobody can look back and say, any good thing about it, generally. But, for the restaurant technology space and for all technology people in hospitality, I don't think there was a better time or better opportunity that COVID brought, which continues to roll today. And, I see that technology in restaurants was not vestigial, but it was like, just there.
Yeah, it was.
It was not at the center. It was not the core. And I would actually just go ahead and say that technology did not have the seat on the business table.
No, at the time, I think most technology groups within restaurants probably answered to the CFO, right? It was a cost center.
Correct. Absolutely. There's no strategic, value, at least being acknowledged.
Yeah, I think really COVID absolutely changed the idea that technology, it wasn't just something you had to have that, if the customer wanted, sure. It was something that you needed and could actually be not just a cost center, but a revenue center, and something that would really help you drive sales. I think that was kind of a turning point for it. And probably at that point, it was like, okay, technology gets elevated. They're really part of the executive team.
So how did your understanding, like when did it hit you that, technology is becoming strategic center? And that actually brings me to how did the transition from a 11 store, 10 store, sort of place happen? When to what?
Yeah, I will say I believe technology should have been elevated much earlier. When I was at Gecko's, like I made that case, and luckily the owners of that brand, like, I think they believed it as well. And that's kind of why they brought me in. They had originally been outsourced to Datum. And they thought it was important enough to their business that they brought me in to lead their technology. So I firmly believed that technology was that important to restaurants. Yeah, I think, COVID obviously cemented that in my mind. I believed it before, but it was really like, okay, this is clear, and now it's going to be clear to everybody. And I think without COVID, that was obviously, it was a major point for me being able to, one, learn a lot. You know, learning about what systems were best in class. It was probably July, 4 months in, 3 months in, and I knew immediately, like, we've got to change online ordering platforms. We've got to have something where our third parties are actually integrated into the POS. Our teams aren't having to work off 4 different tablets and enter them manually in the POS, right? And, for restaurants, margins are what they are. Getting an executive team to, invest in something where, better online ordering, like our online ordering works, right? You can place an order, sure. But being able to, get them to believe that better online ordering, that yes, it's going to cost more money, but it's going to increase sales. It took me a while to learn how to actually, I'm back in the position of having to sell it in, right? I am leading technology. I'm a decision maker, but I'm not the only one, right? And so that was a point for me to have to learn how to sell internally. Obviously something that has helped me dramatically over the years, learning how to sell internally and make my case, and use data, which is extremely important for selling internally. But that was the biggest thing that I learned coming out of COVID, and what I think helped me continue on into, going, like you said, from 11 to now, 300 locations. So after Fresh Kitchen, I guess this was 2021, in 2021, I was approached by actually the same, he had founded Datum, and he sold Datum, and then I left a few months after that. He had started a new group called FTR Hospitality, and they were doing outsourced accounting for restaurants. So, he was in the restaurant space. He knew restaurants. He saw that there was a need for accounting, and SaladWorks was one of their biggest clients. And I guess in his conversations with them, he realized they need technology help. There were 100 units. They were running on, poor technology, really bad.
So you kind of joined them as a consultant, or
No, I joined FTR as an employee, but with SaladWorks, which is now WOWorks, my current company, we were their outsourced IT, right? They had one person internally beforehand, for one person managing all their IT for 100 locations. And they were buying 2 brands, Fruitables and Garbanzo Mediterranean Fresh. So they were going to add another, 60 locations, 70 locations on. And they were sold on outsourced IT, and it was the right thing for them at the time. And so really quick at FTR, we built a team. I think we had, pretty quickly after I started, we had gotten up to like 10 people on the team. And we had a couple other clients as well, but SaladWorks/WOWworks was really our bread and butter, and where we kind of broke our teeth, and we decided how we were going to do things. And one of the first things with buying additional brands, we had to decide, are we going to do a single tech stack, one POS, one line of order, everything, or are we going to try and manage multiple different systems? And there were 3 brands at the time, where we knew they were about to add a 4th with the Simple Greek, and we knew that there were plans in the future to grow and to get a lot more. And already on just those 3 brands, I think there were 4 or 5 POSs. And we knew then, like, we were a fairly small team at FTR even. It was untenable to be able to manage that for 3 brands, let alone if we wanted to get to 5, 10,
Right.
20 brands. And so we decided, let's go with a unified tech stack. I was fairly hands-on and talking to my guys that were really managing the database, and we said, it's actually a really good POS. The database that had been built for SolidWorks was what was killing them. And their franchisees were just extremely unhappy with the system. They had poor online ordering because they were using, I can't remember the name of the technology.
And franchisees are not happy.
Not happy at all.
Okay.
But we, working with it, we knew it was a good POS. And so we fairly quickly, a lot of late nights and all-nighters, completely rebuilt the database.
Mm-hmm.
And we rolled that out, and it was, I don't want to say night and day, but it was a pretty quick switch of franchisees going from wanting to, probably come through a Zoom call and kill us to loving us. Technology.
So what was the shift? What do you mean by, changing the database?
I mean, think of how SolidWorks was a walk down the line concept, right? You go in, you walk down the line, you order your salad, you start with base, toppings, proteins, modifiers. And the biggest choke point was the POS. And that was the backup. And you get a long line and people walk in, they see a line, they don't want to stay. Right? It's not like, order first, where you walk in, you order, and then you're waiting, right? You've already given your money, you're going to wait.
Right.
If you haven't given your money, you're going to walk out.
Yeah.
Especially where a lot of our restaurants are in strip malls, they're surrounded by other restaurants, so there's other options. And what we could do is get rid of that choke point, make it easier, make it work better, make reporting work. That was a major piece. The marketing team had a hard time telling, being able to run a PMix and being able to actually tell what was being sold and how to market things. So that was, some of the changes we made very quickly, making it easy for a cashier to ring up a salad and say what proteins are on it and get the customer going, making payments easier, making payments faster.
So you mean it was not the fault of the POS, but it was just a poorly designed menu configuration?
Exactly. Menu configuration, not just even menu, I guess, like just the flow that a cashier and a customer had to go through.
Right.
It was just inefficient. And we were able to fix that very quickly. I mean, even to the point where a franchisee would have a hard time 86ing an item, or like that was ironed out very quickly. And we figured that out, and that was really a turning point.
No, that's a very important point. I mean, I have seen that fair bit, in our experience, and and this was the first time I'm hearing it from somebody else. It has happened with us multiple times.
Yeah.
While we kind of take care of it now, and we are quite sensitive to it. That menu configuration and how the workflow is done and how many steps does it have, and what does a modifier versus an add-on, what does it lead to in reporting, and how does it impact your pricing and promotions.
Yeah,
we are extremely sensitive to that now, but we have seen that those slips where somebody at the implementation time on the brand side strong-armed somebody on our side at implementation and said, hey, you know what, do it like this, and they said, sure. I mean, I don't have the eligibility or the view into what's your business call. And only later we somebody on our team realized that, oh, these guys are in a mess because they just went wrong with this one.
And you mentioned operations. I'll actually take one further. I've personally seen a brand, I won't say, but that marketing is really the one that's driving their POS builds.
That's even worse.
And they are extremely unhappy with their POS. And I've told them, like, you need to stop marketing from driving, because they're trying to basically, shoehorn in legacy into what they have a great POS new that should be able to work for them. But marketing is trying to turn it into something that they used to have and they're used to, and they're not willing to change. And that is ruining, and it will ruin any POS they have going forward.
And I agree with you. I completely agree with you. But I really have, a question here. I think in the restaurant space, and I'll give you some context. I, was a restaurant operator, and I was always a technologist. I used to run a telecom tech company, and I then became a restaurateur for a little while, less than 2 years. And so I experienced the heat, that an operator experienced, and then being a restaurant tech company for 13 years now, and we've experienced some 20,000 plus restaurants. And I can tell you one thing, that this best in class narrative for restaurant as a problem, I find it, bringing more pain to the restaurant operators than the solution. And let me, also be specific in that, right? For example, there are a few things which can be verticalized, like, for example, e-commerce. Okay. E-commerce is a consumer facing product stack. Their job is to manage volumes. Their job is to, have a great UI, a great UX, fast checkout, menu, and what is being ordered, whether it's soap or whether it's a sub, is the last problem, right? So that is one class. I understand that, right? But within the restaurant operations, what I have seen is that this best in class narrative has, taken like really wild verticalization, where features are becoming products, where I see, restaurant companies signing up 7, 8, 10, 11 different products of small and, big size. And then they end up not talking to each other, because integration is not only about talking to each other. What happens post integration? Does the architecture match? Is the data? And this is the biggest battle between front of the house and back of the house, which continues to remain unsolved in 2025. I'm yet to meet a restaurant operator, in who will tell me that their back of the house and front of the house are absolutely in sync from, making sense of the data, and just not integration and, reporting. So a longish question, but, philosophy, where do you stand? And,
I think that's my job. I think my job is making sure that they really communicate, right? And when I say best in class, I don't necessarily mean like there's one product in each vertical that is the best in class, right? It could be the best in class for your needs. You're not looking at a single item and saying they are the best, we're going to go with the best one. I think there are, there's levels, and I'm looking at like the best level, right? And not looking at, somebody that, did an online ordering system in their basement and threw it up for their mom's restaurant, and I was trying to sell it, right? I'm like, really, best in class to me means it's a great product. They have the team to stand behind it. Honestly, have the money to stand behind it and make sure it stays a product that we're going to be able to, is going to be viable for us to use for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And really my job then is to make sure that there's that communication between the pieces that we put in place. Not, like you said, not just the integration, but working with my teams, my partners, and connecting them also, and saying like, hey, my POS, I really need you to work for my back office. Let's find out why my data is flowing, but it's not working the way we need it to work. Help us out here, making sure they communicate. If I do that, it's probably going to help some other operators out there. But then if you look at, you're mentioning, you're signing up for 7, 8, 9, 10 items. A big part of that also is, are you then paying 7, 8, 9, 10 bills every month? Becomes difficult, like tracking all of that. Potentially becomes more expensive. I would argue it probably keeps costs down a little bit, because
I think cost is just one element. I agree with the cost, but what I just said is the reason why, let's say some of the companies are now buying multiple products, where, the irony is, and it really beats me, their own acquired products are not really talking to each other seamlessly.
Yes.
And it's not about technical prowess. They won't. They will never talk to each other. They may be able to, kind of sync data through a middle layer eventually, but, that's not talking. That's not a conversation, right? It's like translating a French and a Spanish text to English. Yeah, you can probably do that, but that's not conversation. That's
right.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think like you said though, even as some brands acquire others, that's not fixing it, right? And um, I think there's also a downfall though if that of I'll go back to POS, but if like a POS company acquires an online ordering company or a loyalty company, it's taking away focus from the product that they do best, or it potentially is, unless some companies are buying those. And like you said, the products don't talk to each other, but a lot of times the product teams or the teams overseeing those products don't even talk to each other.
Correct.
And
Correct.
so a lot of the
That's worse.
yeah, and a lot of the implied savings of time and money, like especially the time. Oh, okay, you're both owned by giant company A. Great. I'm gonna have one weekly call with you, right? Well, no, you still have to have a call with them and a call with us. Our systems
Did you experience this?
Yes.
Damn. I used to wonder. I didn't know this. I used to wonder because I know that teams don't talk to each other
Yeah.
at a lot of places. So I used to wonder how our customers or account managers fixing that.
We've used a POS that bought a loyalty company, and it's like your loyalty product doesn't even work best with your POS. It works best with this other one.
This is crazy.
And
this was my assumption, and it was my read. I never had a chat with anybody firsthand who experienced exactly that.
Yeah, it's not any more painful than having separate things, but it's mentally painful. You're like, but you're both the same company.
That was the narrative that was sold.
Yeah, and probably why the CEO of that giant company said, "This is a great synergy. We're gonna be able to work together." And it's like, but you're not.
Yeah. Back to your strategic side.
Yeah.
What has changed for Kyle over last, let's say 4 years, given you're now having a seat on table? Technology is at the center. You are impacting revenue as well as bottom line. You are impacting new plans. I'm sure, what is it like, right? Has it changed already to the point where every new strategic direction at the company, you are definitely in it, given tech is going to lead it or enable it right from the start? And how has that changed your understanding of what Kyle used to think in 2020 and 21 versus 2025?
I think every major initiative that our company and probably most every other restaurant company handles right now, technology is a key player in, right? I mean, for us right now, if we're looking at how do we increase top line or, how do we increase AUV in general? And kiosk is a major initiative, right? Like, or, if it's, hey, let's look at back office. How is that going to affect our bottom line? Maybe not the top line or AUV, but how is that going to affect margin and profit? And obviously, technology, no matter where you look, it's a key player in every initiative. And I think for me, what I've learned over the past 5-10 years is I need to know better the operations side, the marketing side, so that when I go and try and sell in a solution and talk about how the technology is going to make operations life easier, or how it's going to make it so that marketing can find 100 new people per restaurant, or like increase that top line. How are we going to find and market to our customers that we might not know? Like, we have 17% of our customers in a loyalty program. How do you market to the other 83% effectively and cost efficiently? And for me, having to understand how marketing works and what they're looking at, that's been my biggest takeaway over the past few years. Beforehand, it was, I'm restaurant technology. I don't care about operations and marketing. And what I do does affect them, but they can come to me and tell me what they want. I feel like I have to be more proactive and say, here's what we need to do. This is why it's good for you operations. Let's try this. Let's talk about, you poke holes in it for sure, but I'm coming to you with a solution to a problem that I see you have. I don't want you coming to me with your problems asking for a solution. And the same with marketing.
Kyle, tell me a little bit about family. What's happening on the personal side?
So I've got married for 11 years, 11 years in May. And we've got 2 daughters, 5 and 7.
Good.
It's, having them so close, they're in back-to-back grades. So weekends right now are full of birthday parties and soccer practice and soccer games. And if there's none of that, can we go for a bike ride or scooter ride and go to the playground? So yeah, it's a fun time. It's busy, very busy.
I'm on the way. I have a 6-month-old.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
I know that there's a lot of madness in front of me.
Yeah. And, my wife and I decided after our second, like, that was it. We had thought about, a third, but really it's, and her doctor told us, we were thinking about it. He's like, with 2, you can play man to man. Once you go third, you got to play zone defense. And we've noticed where, hey, we can, if there's an issue between the girls or, moody, we can separate them. My wife can take one. I can take the other. And it's like, okay, let's calm down. And we can go on a walk. I can go on a walk with one of them, or she can take one to the store. And once you get with 3, that's hard to do. So yeah, two little girls. And
Are you working from home or office?
yeah, so WOWorks, we're 100% remote. We have no office. Our team is 100% distributed. Our executive team, we're CEOs in Naples, our CFO's upstate New York. I'm in Memphis. My team, I've got people in Atlanta, here in Vegas, New York, Delaware. So we're all over the place, down in Texas as well. And so, there's pros and cons to being remote. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love it. We are lucky enough where we still get together fairly regularly, especially as an executive team. We meet up at least quarterly, but I feel for the past 6 months we've been meeting up every other month. I find reasons to, if I'm in an area that one of my team members lives, meet up with them for sure. So I think technology is another big piece in that. We've implemented Microsoft Teams. We're a Microsoft shop, so Teams is a major piece for us. There's definitely a point where you have too many meetings, but then what we've started seeing is coworkers just having a video chat open, not necessarily having a meeting, but having a video chat open, 3 or 4 people in there. You're just working on your computer. You're doing.
Oh wow, that happens.
Yeah.
I used to hear all about that during COVID.
Yeah.
But I used to find it amusing. I mean, and necessary those days.
Yeah.
I haven't heard this happening now.
Yeah. My VP, he and I will, we'll message him and be like, hey, can I swing by to your office? And I'll literally we'll start a Teams call and we'll, chat. And sometimes, I've got, something on my screen that I'm working on. And he knows that if my eyes gloss over for a minute, I'm looking at the screen, that I'm probably reading something I need to read. And, we're not necessarily having a pointed conversation, but it's, we're there, we're talking to each other, and it kind of gives you that social aspect back.
But that's a good culture as well. I think that means, you guys have a great culture for you to be able to do that.
Yeah.
What do you do to keep yourself enriched? How do you, do you read books, podcasts? What happens? What are you doing for learning?
Definitely read a lot of books. Starting last year, I hate the term New Year's resolutions, but it was kind of one of my personal initiatives, my personal goals to read more, and not necessarily I definitely read both fiction and nonfiction, but to start reading more professional development books and just, for lack of a better term, self-help books and I guess personal development.
What are you reading right now? And what was the highlight of the year book?
I think the book that made the biggest impact on me was the 5 a.m. Club. I used to be a night owl. I would work late into the night. I would not like to wake up early in the morning. And I read that book and something clicked. And
really?
Yes.
I'm that guy you're explaining. So
yeah. And I'll tell you, as your kids get older, it becomes more and more difficult to stay up late and sleep in at all because kids wake up early. Especially my kids were getting into school age. And so I was having to wake up every morning and get them ready for school. And I read that book and I don't know what it was. It clicked in me. There's maybe a handful of days over the past year and a half that I have slept past 5 a.m.
Wow.
And
that is nuts.
I go to bed a little earlier for sure. But I feel better. I have far more energy. And it's not just about waking up early, right? And it's about what you do in the morning, how you spend your time, making sure it's, mindful and you're doing what matters.
I'm that at night, but that's the point. I actually relate to nocturnal.
Yeah, no, that was definitely me. As winter 2023, like end of 2023, I was staying up late. I would work late. I had a habit, and I still do this to a point, but I'd work during the day. I'd take some time off, spend time with the family, do dinner, get the kids to bed. I'd sign back on, and I'd work late into the night. And now I still get back on after I go to bed, but it's maybe to answer emails, read through a few things, and limit my time. I find I'm far more productive in the days where I am working. Like, my time is more productive. And in the mornings, I wake up, I try not to look at a screen for 2 hours. I, have a pretty set schedule of, certain days working out, certain days just enjoying my time, drinking coffee, drinking water, and being mindful of my time. And so the 5 a.m. Club was probably the most impactful book I've ever read.
That's amazing. I'm going to mark that for my reading as well.
I highly recommend it. I will say the writing style is odd. It's written as a fiction book. It's not your traditional.
Well, it's like a fable.
Yes. Yeah. And you're gonna get me, 10% of the way into the book, and you're like, what am I reading? And by the end, halfway through the book, I was starting to implement some of the things I've already learned, and it was just. I read that book, I think, in 3 days, and it was just immediately life-changing.
Awesome. And what are you reading right now?
I just finished Atomic Habits, like on the plane right here.
So you're on the spectrum.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm probably going to go with a fiction book as my next book on the my next travels. Yeah. I do a mixture of physical books, Kindles, and audiobooks. So I'm not sure what I'm going to read next. Depends on what I have access to.
That's awesome. Kyle, this was a great conversation. And I don't think I have ever discussed point of sale system or technology at all on this part in last 45 episodes with anyone in such detail. But I think, I love your thinking process. I think it was a great conversation. Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.